Louisiana is trying to save tigers, whose population has dropped 97% in the last 20 years worldwide. The most famous tiger in Louisiana is Mike the Tiger, the mascot of LSU. Mike is the only live tiger mascot in the nation. He lives in a spacious home on the campus of LSU and receives care daily from the LSU School of Veterinary Medicine.
Mike the Tiger is a very special part of the LSU community. He represents an endangered species, the tiger. That's a very iconic animal species. In fact, it's the most illustrated animal in all of art history. Mike is a mixed breed tiger. He is a combination primarily of Siberian and Bengal tiger. He's 4 years old. He's been on this campus for 3 years. He's fed every evening. He eats a standard carnivore diet. It looks like hamburger, but it's more than that. It's a combination of meat, fish, vegetables, vitamins, soy, and minerals. We can't just feed them muscle meat. That's imbalanced in its calcium and phosphorus ratio and will cause problems. And in the wild, they eat the whole animal anyway, so they get the glandular organs as well as the muscle tissue. So it's a balanced diet that is fed by zoos to carnivores all over the country. There are 56 universities in the United States that have the tiger as their mascot. Of course, Mike is the only live tiger on a university campus and owned by a university, so that's very special. Mike lives in a 15,000 square foot habitat. It's got the yard, which you can see, the waterfall, the pool, the stream. He also has a night house where he is brought into every evening. Mike has a very affectionate and engaging personality. One of the reasons we selected this tiger instead of other tigers was because of his personality. We do have to keep in mind, though, that he is a tiger, so he's not a pet. Tigers are not domesticated animals. Many of them, of course all of them in the United States, have never been outside this country. They've never been in the wild. They've always been raised in captivity, but that doesn't make an animal a domesticated animal. So we are very careful with him, and we never forget that he is a tiger, which is an apex predator. Mike is very well cared for. We watch over him very closely. My 2 veterinary students check on him twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, and I come over and check on him a number of times a week, a couple times a week, 2 to 3, depending on how he's doing. He's in very good health, and so we don't have any immediate concerns for his health, but we do watch him very closely. Now, the wild tiger population has declined tremendously in the past 20 years. It's estimated that the population has declined about 97%. The vast majority of the reason for that is simply habitat loss. Of course, poaching has been an issue, but it's primarily habitat loss. So it's the loss of prey species and an inability to find mates. The loss of tigers in the wild is almost an inevitable component of the human population expansion. Clearly, more needs to be done to preserve the remaining habitat. Areas need to be developed so that tigers can move from one habitat to another, so they can get together. And of course, the illegal trade in tiger parts needs to be eliminated. Range countries have developed plans for preserving and to some extent growing back their wild populations of tigers. They simply need to enact and abide by those plans. And if they would do those, which really focus on prevention of poaching and habitat conservation, then we would see an increase, a return of some of these tigers that have been lost.
LSU is currently conducting genetic research in the hopes of reversing the declining tiger population.
LSU's first research project on tigers is a genetics project. We're going to be working in collaboration with Leslie Lyons, who's at the University of Missouri, which is also part of the Tigers United Consortium. And Alessandra is going to be looking at 3 different things. So the first thing is to look at the genetic relatedness of zoo tigers, which are in the species survival plan, which is interested in the conservation of tigers. So those tigers are bred for conservation purposes. And the tigers are very carefully managed with a pedigree to avoid inbreeding, but like most pedigrees, there's no information on the relatedness of the tigers that started the breeding program. In other words, the founders of the pedigree, we don't know how related they are. So you can use genetic information to look at the genetic relatedness of the tigers and use that information to supplement what we know from the pedigrees, and that helps to avoid issues with inbreeding. The second aspect of her work is to see if there's a relationship between genetic variants and poor quality sperm. So this is in collaboration with Jason Herrick, who's at the Omaha Henry Dooley Zoo. He has information on sperm quality, and Ali is going to pair that up with her genetic data. Finally, the last thing we want to do is look at the genetics of privately owned tigers which are not held in zoos. So 3 different parts to this work. The first is to look at the amount of hybridization among the 3 subspecies that are commonly found in the US, so the Sumatran, the Malayan, and the Amur tigers. And then another thing is to look at the levels of inbreeding that have been caused by uncontrolled breeding. And finally, to see if there's any relationship between genetic variants and traits that are associated with inbreeding in tigers, like cleft palates, for instance. So overall, we hope to be a long-term participant in the Tigers United Consortium. We hope that this is a long-term project where we can look at the genetics of captive tigers in an ongoing way, and also hopefully participate in the genetics of wild tigers in the future. And at least for the captive tigers, if we can assess what the extent of the problem is and where the problems lie, then we can help formulate some solutions for their conservation.
My name is Alessandra Bresnan, and I'm a third-year PhD student in the Conservation Genetics Lab of Dr. Sabrina Taylor at Louisiana State University. I've always had a passion for big cats, but tigers have always fascinated me since I was a small child because of their power, their beauty, their strength. And then when I studied my undergraduate, I learned that actually they're very important as well for conservation because they're an umbrella species, which means if they're protected in their environment and their habitat, all other species are protected. So not only are they beautiful, but they're also very important for conservation as a whole. My research is focused on examining the genetics of captive tigers here in the United States. I'm going to be using a method called whole genome sequencing, which actually is at the top of the line for genetic techniques, because it allows you to get the entire genetic code of an individual animal. And so I'm going to use whole genome sequencing in order to look at a number of different aspects of captive tigers, because it's so important to have a viable captive tiger population so that one day we could potentially reintroduce them into the wild, which is the goal of many zoos. So my research project has many different aspects. The first being looking at the relatedness of tigers in species survival plans. Species survival plans are captive breeding programs that are set up by AZA accredited zoos in which they manage the genetic diversity of these tigers by knowing their relatedness using pedigrees and stud books. But by integrating genetic analyses, which is what I can do with the whole genome sequencing, we can get more fine-scale information about their relatedness and see exactly how related they are, because many times you assume that the tigers that you take out from the wild are unrelated. And this might not always be the case. So by using genetic analyses, we can really understand if that was indeed the case or not. Also, tigers have had decreased sperm production in the last 10 years or so. And this is research being carried out by Dr. Jason Herrick at the Henry Dooley Zoo in Omaha. And we have agreed to collaborate with him in order to try to understand if there's any genetic causes that are underlying this reduced sperm production. We are also going to focus on tigers that are not in AZA facilities, so not found in species survival plans. These tigers are called generic tigers. We don't know how many there are in the United States, but it's an estimated 5,000 to 10,000. There's so many of these, and they're kept by private breeders in circuses, and roadside zoos. And so these tigers often have problems with inbreeding. So for example, white tigers often have issues with cleft palate, cross-eyed, or they have clubbed feet. And this is because in order to get the white coat, 2 different related individuals are mated with one another to create the white coat, and it leads to inbreeding. The goal of our research is to try to make sure that the tigers that are found in the AZA zoos are as genetically diverse as possible. AZA zoos already do this with stud books and pedigrees, but by bringing in a genetic factor into this, we can really get at the fine-scale questions of whether the ones that they took out from the wild in the beginning were related to one another. And by maximizing the genetic diversity of these captive populations, hopefully we'll have a strong captive population for eventual reintroductions in the future.
There are two categories of tigers in the world. There are the ones that are found in the wild tigers, and the ones that are held in captivity. So the range countries for the tigers are in Asia. You know, there's a number of different subspecies, the Amur, Sumatran, Malayan, South China, for instance. And then there's a few subspecies that have already gone extinct, like the Caspian, the Java, and the Bali subspecies. And usually the research that's done on tigers in the wild is done in those range countries because there are quite a few permits involved with exporting and importing samples, which is quite a barrier. The other way you can look at tigers is to see what's been happening in captivity. So in the US, there are a lot of tigers in captivity. And again, two categories. There are the tigers that are in the species survival plan, which are carefully managed to maximize genetic diversity, reduce issues with inbreeding. And then there are tigers which are not held by species survival plan zoos, and those tigers are not managed really at all, right? So there's no control over whether different subspecies are bred together, which means that you lose that genetic lineage of a subspecies. And there's also no management in terms of how inbred those tigers are. So some of those tigers are quite highly inbred, and you can see the results of that with defects like club feet and cleft palates.
Also involved are a group of LSU students, Tigers for Tigers.
The name of our organization is Tigers for Tigers. We are a student organization at LSU who fundraises for research that is done right here at LSU, and we also promote the education of the public of tiger conservation. Our group is involved with tigers because we think it is an important species to conserve and save, so our family and our generations that come in the future are also able to see the tiger as a living species in the United States and other countries. It's important to continue this research in the future, and the support of the public is very critical.
So I joined Tigers for Tigers because I thought it was a really important cause that people don't know about. I think it's really important to advocate for things even if other people don't know about it, and tiger preservation really isn't something that people think, you know, hey, we here in Louisiana need to worry about, but as a society, and it's a really big, it's a big picture.
I joined Tigers for Tigers because I've honestly just loved tigers since I was really little. I used to come here all the time with my mom to come visit Mike. They've always been my favorite animal. And when I heard about the group, I had to join. I love tigers so much, and just learning more about the preservation of them and how important it is was really important to me.
I would like the public to know that it is super important to preserve the species because, like other big cats, tigers are one of our most endangered species. They face things from habitat destruction to poaching, and there's actually more tigers in captivity than there are in the wild. So we, as a species that has done so much to harm this earth, we've done a lot of really bad things. We need to make that change towards renewable resources and making daily choices that conserve and protect these species.
I think it's kind of sad that species have gone extinct just because people, there's wild hunting and things like that. But the research that LSU is doing is really important just because, it provides an insight into the future, what we can do better as a society, how to just take care of species. And even though it's only tigers that they're looking at right now, this could translate over into other species as well.
So there's a lot of issues about tiger poaching all over the world, and it's really sad and disappointing just because tigers are such beautiful animals. They get so big and not enough people know about them, and it's sad that most of our children probably won't ever see a tiger if things don't change.
I joined Tigers for Tigers because as a natural resource ecology and management major, this is truly what I want to base my career in. I want to advocate for endangered species and teach people to care for them and continue to support organizations and make daily choices that are going to impact endangered species like Mike.
The amount of research they do is so helpful, and this tiger, Mike, lives like a king over here. Like, they have veterinarians around the clock looking after him, and they come and they clean up after him every single day. The amount of research they do and work they do for it is helping more than anything.
So I think that tiger conservation is also not only important to us in the United States, but also to people in various countries, because tigers are apex predators. And apex predators, they do a lot of things like support ecosystems and keep populations down where they need to be down and keep populations up where they need to be up. And they're just very crucial to everywhere, not just in the United States.
Mike the tiger gives hope, stands for hope, strength of LSU, and tigers themselves can stand for other things for people around the world too.
Down the road, our organization will be doing more fundraising events to support our efforts for this research. So if you would like to make a contribution, please email lsutigersfortigers@gmail.com and I will give you more information on how you can donate.
LSU is not alone in this effort. 3 other universities, all with tiger mascots, have formed the Tigers United University Consortium: Auburn, Clemson, and Missouri.
There is no animal on planet Earth like a tiger. All at once so intimidating, but so beautiful. That's why so many athletes at schools like LSU, Auburn, Missouri, and Clemson step into every arena with the pride that comes with calling themselves a tiger. But with every passing year, there are fewer tigers in the wild. Their global population has dipped to below 3,900. That's why those 4 schools have joined forces to create the Tigers United University Consortium, pooling their resources to help in the global effort to save their namesake animal, with a focus on conservation, education, and repopulation. They've decided that simply holding that tiger is not enough. If you're going to wear the stripes, then it's time to help save your own.
Our first big success, if you will, is that each university agreed to sponsor PhD students from India to come and work with our faculty to get their doctorates and then go back and do the research on tiger conservation back at home.
To see one in the wild is something that is awe-inspiring. You're just not the same after you've seen one. The thing about the tiger is it's a healthier force when the tiger is present, and it doesn't change the balance of nature. It's kind of the epitome of biodiversity, and if we lose it, what it's going to lose behind it.
Because there cannot be a balanced forest without a tiger. If the forest is not well balanced, the tigers won't be there.
I've seen so many tigers, hundreds of them in the wild, but every time I see one, it just gives me those same goosebumps, and the feeling is still the same. It is a teacher. If you observe tigers and if you're really passionate about knowing how it leads its life and how it moves, despite all the problems that we have, tiger is still surviving.
I love to hear the forest coming alive. Every animal is calling. It is not just that the animals are scared of it. I think they have so much respect and awe. There is research on ecotourism, there is research on grassland management, there is research on exotic species, and I think countries are excited by what is happening here.
The students and the academicians and the entire Clemson universe connects to tigers in such a big way. When I saw my first match back in 2017, the Go Tigers roaring around the entire stadium and the sea of orange that was to be seen is huge. More than the mascot, I think this is a very important partnership, and we really would like to take it to other tiger range countries also beyond India. It can be a model to take this partnership forward.
What Clemson is conveying is the importance of saving the apex predator. Because if you save the tiger, you save other species, including our own. It's about national parks being engines of economic growth. If you take out a tiger from a forest, people stop coming to that forest. The entire ecotourism collapses.
In all the land-grant universities, there are so many students from Asia which belong to these tiger range countries. These young students can be champions in their country, especially to reduce the demand for illegal wildlife trafficking and consumption of body parts within their countries. And I think the next generation can be the real leaders, and we really need new age tiger champions who can lead us into the phase where we actually eliminate the demand for tiger and wildlife body parts.
And the interesting thing that I found about working around tigers is the same problems that face tigers face the rhinoceros, face the elephant, the mountain gorilla, all in Africa. So the problems and the solutions to those problems, if we can save the tiger, can be used to save other animals as well.
And I think it will be a celebration of human morality.
The tiger is an apex predator. In any ecosystem, there's more dominant species. It's one of those. If we can protect the tiger and its habitat, we can protect all kinds of other species of flora and fauna below it. And it's just a critical mega fauna that's very charismatic, and it gets a lot of people's attention, but we are precariously close of losing this animal, and we could lose it in a generation if we don't take steps to protect it. The loss of tigers over the last part of this century has certainly been something that can be attributed to three major things. One is the loss of habitat. The world's population is growing. We've got more and more people that are consuming land, and tigers need lots of remote wilderness to live in. The second reason is poaching and illegal wildlife trade. It's a multi-billion-dollar syndicated business where tigers are being poached out of the wild for all kinds of uses, some of which is related to traditional Chinese medicines and certain exotic cures, which we don't believe is actually factual. So there's a lot of that going on where we are losing tigers through illegal trade, as well as other animals. And then the final thing is human-wildlife conflict. And twice in my experience, as I've traveled to tiger range countries in Asia, there have been situations where tigers and humans came in conflict, whether it be with killing livestock or actually killing humans. And sometimes that's very, very unfortunate, but it does happen. And then there's retaliatory killings of tigers and other things as the people take it out on the animal, because we are encroaching on their territory, not necessarily the other way around. Success we've seen with our consortium is the primary success has been most recently our PhD program. We now have 8 Indian Forest Service or natural resource conservation professionals that are matriculating under our PhD programs at our 4 universities. So we've gotten those students enrolled. Some of them have been with us for almost 2 years now, and they are starting to go out and do their research in the field back in India related to tiger conservation. So their work will have an immediate impact on the tiger conservation and the Global Tiger Recovery Program as we move this thing forward. That's our first big success and the first thing that we've really gotten to accomplish together. When I got to Clemson 20 years ago, I was amazed at the passion of people for tigers here at our university. And it's the same of the 100,000 people that packed Death Valley and Baton Rouge, the same that packed the stadium in Auburn and Missouri, yelling for their tigers. And they don't translate that passion yet into efforts to save the tiger, but that's our mission, to try to capture and harness the power and the passion of our fan bases and our alumni, and to bring our scientists to bear upon some of the problems so we can help solve some of the challenges facing tigers in the wild, as well as the ones to protect the ones here for a more humane life here in the United States.
Mike is also a symbol. He's more than that, but he is a symbol to the LSU community of everything good that they remember about their time at LSU, and that's a very powerful symbol. It is important that the LSU community support our tiger conservation efforts. We've started out small with one student. We're hoping to continue this and expand it and really bear down on this captive tiger population so that we can preserve them. You know, if the tigers in the wild are lost, all we will have will be the captive tiger population. So we take that very seriously, and we're moving ahead with the research on that population.
I think that members of the public already care about tiger conservation. You know, you can tell by the number of universities that have tigers as mascots. It's not just the 4 universities in the Tigers United Consortium. You can tell by how interested people are in these animals in zoos, how interested people were in the Tiger King feature that came out last year. And it would be great to be able to foster that interest in these tigers to help protect them so that they persist over the long term, for instance, through fundraising, research, and education.
It's important for the public to support this program because there's already so much enthusiasm around tigers. That's why so many universities have tiger mascots, and that's why tigers are such an important icon for so many different sports teams as well. So if you can take that enthusiasm and garner it in order to conserve these tigers as a whole, I think that's really important so that future generations can also come to love tigers and know that they're not something of the past.
People can go to the Tigers United University Consortium, which is hosted by Clemson University, and that gives a broad overview of what's going on at all 4 universities. If they're more interested in the research that is happening at LSU, they can search under LSU's School of Renewable Natural Resources, my name, Sabrina Taylor, and they'll be able to track that down.
Mike the Tiger has a website that is sponsored by the Tiger Athletic Foundation. There's some history about each of the tigers, a little bit of history about tiger conservation. In addition, and in a very living way, Mike has a Facebook page. And Ginger Gutner manages that page. She's updating it daily with news about Mike. And so he has many, many followers, over 100,000 followers. And so Mike's followers can find out what's new with Mike the Tiger by following his Facebook page, and he also has a Twitter account.